Hi, this is Matt Wasserman,
I'm Kaye Taavialma.
and we're with Make Philanthropy Work, and we're excited to present on micro campaigns and creating your fundraising story today. And we're also a proud sponsor of the Leadership Summit. And so we'll jump right in. So again, Matt Wasserman, I'm the principal and founder of Make Philanthropy Work, and I've been fundraising in the community for over 25 years, working with Denver Art Museum, University of Colorado Denver, worked with several charter schools, worked extensively with Kaye on charter schools as a board member and also in fundraising. And when I'm not out fundraising, I'm spending time with the family and enjoying all the great things that Colorado has to offer, skiing, hiking, camping, all that great stuff. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. There's my LinkedIn handle, and love to hear from you, love to connect. And then also my Twitter handle, not on Twitter as much, but please do, please connect. And I'll hand it over to Kaye.
Thanks, Matt. As Matt said, I'm Kaye, and he and I have worked together at several schools where I've been and led. I was in the ed world in school buildings for about the better part of 20 years, 10 of them in leadership, specifically charter schools. I've been at Axel Academy down in Aurora, helped found and lead Kip Denver Collegiate, and then most recently was the school leader at an executive director at Ricardo Flores Magón Academy, a CSI school. And it was at that school Matt and I really developed our collaboration. And Axel is when he was my board president and got to evaluate me.
Awesome.
And then we deepened our professional relationship while I was at RFMA, when he actually came and helped support me in a fundraising effort and really opened my eyes to what's possible for charter schools. And through our work together, we secured a $15.5 million BEST grant for the school to get a new building, and throughout the process raised several $100,000 towards the match that we were required to give. Now I've transitioned and I do work with MPW to help support charter schools in this fundraising process, as well as providing my own education and leadership coaching and consulting. I do a lot of work with school boards and nonprofit boards. I found that they are often the most overlooked, under-resourced facet of a school, and yet they are one of the most important. So I really enjoy that work. And when I'm not doing that work, I am a bleacher-bound mom, although not really in the COVID world. My senior son is a varsity wrestler for East High School. So for the past 3 years, I have been sequestered in gymnasiums from November until like March. And I do some acting on the side in the local community. My LinkedIn profile and my coaching website. So please reach out if you're interested in connecting around anything I've mentioned. Definitely hit us up if you want to learn more about the fundraising work that we do. And that's what we're going to spend today focused on.
Awesome. Thanks, Kaye. So a little bit about Make Philanthropy Work. Here's our little advertisement. So we are a fundraising consulting agency and provide a suite of services that transform impact and advance missions. We work very closely with charter schools, developing services specifically tailored to guide schools in unlocking their full fundraising potential and create sustainable fundraising practices for schools so it can reach sustainability. And our services for fundraising services for charter schools are really grounded in the best practices and geared to support leaders and boards. We serve here's a list of our clients. And as you can see, many charter schools and really a lot in education, the P20 realm, working with Colorado early colleges, Lunch High School, and of course, as Kaye mentioned, Ricardo Flores Magón Academy, to name a few. I think I got it now. So most donors say that knowing the impact of their gift is more important than recognition. And we have put this slide up because we feel it's really important for the theme of all fundraising and also very relevant to building micro campaigns. So impact over recognition, and just want you to keep that in mind as we go through our webinar. So agenda, we'll cover building a micro campaign, the importance of the impact, the idea story. This is all about the idea and the story and building your story for the micro campaign. And then we'll just kind of go through that thread and then talk about working on your own story. And I'll turn it over to Kaye to talk about what is a micro campaign.
Yeah, so a micro campaign, I mean, to be honest, you guys are all probably familiar with it because it's what you do if your school participates in Colorado Gives Day. That's basically a small micro version of a micro campaign. In totality, it's a 30 to 90 day multi-channel campaign. What do we mean by multi-channel? We mean like you're hitting up Facebook, you're hitting up Twitter, you're hitting up Instagram, you're sending out emails, like you're blasting across various channels to get your message out. And through that work, you have selected a specific funding target. So something that you really want to push out into the world that you say, we need your help funding X around. So there's a purpose to the giving. It's, as mentioned earlier, digitally based. So these aren't snail mail oriented. It's not the bake sale that's happening at the school or the Smensel sale. This is something that's being pushed out into the ether through yourself and your team. And it's really something that is focused on inspiring your base of supporters. So the people who are the biggest cheerleaders for your school and who will be there, that's who we're targeting these campaigns around. You're really getting them excited. So in the process, that's kind of the overview of what it is. What it includes, the elements it includes are an inspiring story. So you're really going to focus on making sure that what you're sharing and what you're raising support around has an inspirational story, right? Like tugs somewhere so people will give. It's going to leverage your base. Again, those people who are most pumped up and jazzed about you. It's going to get them excited to get off of the bleachers and out doing the work for you. You're going to try and pull in. We're going to focus on helping you understand how to get matching gifts, right? Because that we all hear those on the pledge drives, like, and that just like creates an allure of excitement because you've got some, like your money goes further, right? And you can build awards into it. So a way of saying thank you, acknowledging people, promoting them for their giving. And the most critical piece, which is also the hardest and takes some planning, well, I'm not going to say the hardest, but it's one of the most challenging elements, is that it is all about constant communication. You can't let your guard down. You have to have a plan and stick to it. All right, Matt.
And you can't communicate too much. Never feel like you're sending too many emails or too many.
Very true. All right, so although today's focus is going to be on your story, because that is the most critical element of a successful micro campaign, we wanted to give you a sense before we dig into that about all the various aspects and steps related to a successful micro campaign and putting one together. And this is the work that we are available to help coach and guide you through as well. So it's really about setting your focus area, right? Like, what are you raising money for? Setting a goal amount. What's your target goal for what you want to raise? Choosing your platform. I do want to call out, you'll see in this list that we have up here, Donors Choose is not up there. It's the go-to for all schools. So my guess is most leaders on here, their schools have run some sort of Donors Choose campaign, or somebody on their team has. One of the things that Matt really made clear to me when we first started working together, because we had a lot of Donors Choose campaigns, that shifted me away from really wanting to leverage that platform, is the way it's set up to keep the donors to your efforts private. So one of the big keys in micro campaigns is to get the contact information of the people who are giving money, so you can develop and cultivate that relationship over time and hopefully transition them from like a $50 giver to maybe a $5,000 giver over the course of a few years, right? And without access to their information to be in contact, it's hard to do that. So that's one of the reasons Matt really geared me to shift away from Donors Choose and start to look at different platforms where we could actually call that information.
Yeah, really. Relationship building platforms to help you build those relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So budget, figuring out what your budget is for the micro campaign, because it ain't free, everybody. You got to make sure you have the funding to run it. It's a low lift compared to an in-person event. I will say that. Like, micro campaign, hands down, has a lower overhead than any event you will ever think about throwing. So even though budget is in there, it is not what you're used to when you think about fundraising budgets. You also want to identify your team, right? And there are all sorts of roles and aspects to go into that, and building out a timeline. And that timeline needs to be at least a 30-day lead start before you actually launch your campaign.
At least. So if you're planning Colorado Gives Day,
now.
Start now.
Start now. That's exactly right. Through that, then you get into the meat of the work. So that's kind of like the high level work and getting your foundation laid. And now we actually get to build the different rooms in the house, so to speak, of the micro campaign. So then it's developing your case, no more than 5 paragraphs. So like, we can all talk forever about how much we love our schools and what they do for kids and families, but distilling that is actually a more challenging task than you would expect. And that's actually why we're choosing to focus on that today.
And that's really, as a school leader, that's really an essential element. I mean, that is the biggest role for a school leader.
Absolutely. And I would say the nice thing is about once you really do that work and craft a compelling, tight case, you can apply it in all sorts of spaces, right? Like, you develop it for the micro campaign, but then I found that case becomes compelling regardless, and you can distill it even more for it to become your elevator pitch. So like, it's such a versatile tool to have and to really own and have ownership of, at least in my opinion. Yeah. So then you look at like engaging partners. So again, thinking about who is going to help you reach your goal, influencers in the community, people on social media who will help champion, who have huge followings, who will maybe really come to your aid to push this campaign out. Your stories and storytellers. So this was always the fun part of the campaign work for me, because it meant really sitting with my community and figuring out which stories and which kiddos and families whose voices were going to show up and help amplify what we were doing and the impact we were having. And then finalize your outreach methods. So that's really getting all of your channels in line and primed to be activated once the campaign goes live.
Lots of channels to choose from. You don't have to choose them all, but at least pick a few and stick with them, the ones that work for you. All right. Thanks, Kaye. Well, we're going to move on to fundraising story creation, which, Kaye talked about earlier. So we follow a method based on the greatest sales deck ever, and I included that link down there so you can check it out yourself. We've changed it a little bit and morphed it for charter school fundraising, but it kind of follows the same pattern more or less. So one, what is the problem you're solving? 2, what will happen if nothing's done? What would the future look like if the problem is solved? How does your organization solve the problem and provide the evidence? And the last is the close. Join us in solving the problem. Give today. So it's really the 5 elements, and that 6 is the close, the ask. And so we're going to go through those each point by point and give you some some information to go on to start building your own. All right, one, what is the problem you're solving? So this first one, you're just talking about the problem that's taking place. And I'm sure, all schools are created really to create impact, to solve a problem, to meet a need, this gap that exists in education, in our community, in society. But this part, you're not going to talk about your school. That is the hardest part about step one. Don't talk about your school. Talk about that problem, that challenge, the issue that your school is solving. But don't mention your school. Don't talk about background to your school. And then what's that pain in the community that the school alleviates? What's that that effect on society, on your students, on families that your school is really set to alleviate? And then you can use real life examples. That real life example could be a composite. Doesn't need to be a story of a student, story of a family, what have you. And then if you have stats and data, it's always good to plug those in. Kaye, in our work with RFMA, you want to talk a little bit about, when we looked at the problem that RFMA is solving?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm going to underscore what Matt said, not talking about your school right off the bat. I think it's for like the first 3 points. You're not allowed to talk about your school, and it's really hard. So that is truth speaking. And I think that's the piece, is like you work through this process together. And what we really distilled down is the problem that we were solving is RFMA focuses on serving Latinx community, and specifically first, second, and some third gen arrivals, and predominant English language learners. So providing a space, so the problem we were really solving was ensuring that marginalized and isolated communities had access to an empowered education and a space that really made them feel safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the important thing to point out, this was really for a building campaign, but Kaye, we talked about the facility because the facility was in such disrepair and awful shape. Yeah. But we really talked about not like, let's get a new brand spanking building with bells and whistles and shiny and all that. It was, let's create this space that is going to create a better life, a better education, or a better place for education for students, and a place for community and family.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. And then the second point is, what will happen if nothing's done? If we sit idle and don't do anything, what's going to happen? Again, don't talk about your school. Let's keep to the problem. But how, what will happen directly to the students and community? How will they be effective? What will it look like next month, in 5 years? And then what's the consequence to society outside your school? So what's the consequence to the community outside your school? And then again, you can use real life stories, data. And so Kaye, with RFMA, what was it? What would happen if nothing was done, if we didn't raise funds for this new facility?
Yeah, it was really the idea that our kids would continue to be, they wouldn't have the tools, and they wouldn't have the educational tools and resources to close their gap in learning, to participate then at the high school level and then at the collegiate level or the post-secondary level in a way that actually brought them fully to the table and allowed them to feel like they were part of this society, this economy, this world and realm, and that was everything. And so the impact economically, especially considering so many of those kids tend to come home and take care of their families, it would lessen their ability to do that. It would lessen their ability to get ahead. It would lessen their participation in our government, in our society, in all of this. So the inability to provide for them that basic would keep them from being full members of our community and actually helping us be better over time as well.
Yeah, great real pain on society as a whole, not just these students and families, but significant impact. All right, the third, so we're starting to move into the light. And, we've talked about the problem, we've talked about issues, the impact on students, family, and then the greater community. But what we start to solve the problem, and your school is working on these problems and solving those problems. What does that future start to look like when the problem's solved? You start to tease that out. Again, don't talk about the school yet. Don't go into detail about your school. I always like the statement, it doesn't have to be like this. I like to take that pause and kind of say, we've gone through all these issues and it doesn't have to be like this. We can change this. We can change this model. We can change what's going on. And again, if you can tell it in the context of a story of a student or a family, and use data and stats. And then, Kaye, you want to talk a little bit about RFMA, how we made that transition from the problem and the impact on society and families on the problem to it doesn't have to be like this. It can look like.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's actually this is a place where I started to use some stats, because at that point, we were just getting our first crop of matriculated 8th graders to I think it was like their junior year in high school. So we were starting to get some real data back around their persistence. And for the Latinx population in the greater Denver area, persistence, like on track for graduation rates, were pretty low. I can't remember what the stats were from a few years ago now. But what we were finding is that our students were persisting at above 90% rate, which was really statistically significant. And so for me, it became the story of, it doesn't have to be like this. The inability to access and participate fully in high school, set up to actually change their high schools and inform the way things evolve, doesn't have to be relegated to what it is now. It can be different. And it's different. We see it being different because our kids are persisting and they are making it happen. And they're identifying, they're going in and telling and having honest conversations with their teachers about how curriculum needs to change. And, these are the types of ways that society then begins to shift, as we're now even seeing stories coming out of various high schools in the area where kids are actually having these conversations. And my kids were doing this about 4 years ago, 5 years ago already, right? So that was the story of we don't have to continue to exist this way. There is a different way.
Yeah. And again, this is all about facility. And this is building a new facility, but we're really talking about the opportunity that this new facility how it's going to impact these students.
But we haven't gotten there yet. And I think that's the cool thing about this process, is understanding that, we all think that at least I was trained to think that the building is the shiny story to tell. But in reality, it's the story of who you are, what you do, and why it matters, right? That's it underneath it all. And so getting to that is really inspirational, because it allows then the story for the building to almost be like the icing on the cake, and of why do we need to ice this cake, right? And that's what's been empowering and inspiring about this work.
Yeah. It's the aha moment.
Yes, for sure.
All right, 4. So how does your school solve the problem? And this is where we get to talk all about our school, all about that project. If it's a micro campaign, you're probably focusing on a specific area, a specific fund. In our example, of course, it's a whole new building, but that could be in STEM, something for STEM related. It could be, an athletic, some type of athletic program.
Artsing, yep.
Yeah, all the above. But you really want to stick to, how's this program related to your overall school? You're not necessarily talking about your vision or mission. You're just talking about solving this greater issue in education and society in your community, and then what you're doing on the front lines to solve this and make it better. Again, tell that story, use stats and data. This was pretty clear for RFMA. And Kaye, you want to talk a little bit about moving into solving the problem?
Sure. So, underneath for everything that we were doing, the root of it is building a community where people feel safe and empowered, right? And our building at the time, and this is where we start to solve this problem by actually creating an equitable space for our marginalized kids and families, right? And our building was falling down, like it was built in probably like over the course of 100 years in different phases. Like the HVAC didn't work. I mean, I know this is all like, right, floods, mold, asbestos. I mean, you name it. We had wind that would blow windows in almost on children a couple of times. Like it was like, really, we're putting children in this building type of building. And it really just further underscored how little we cared as a society about our under-resourced, marginalized populations, our brown and black kids, right? So it was just like, it was further proof. And so it became that, listen, if we're really serious about creating an equitable playing field, then we need to do the right thing and get them in a building that actually does service them and provide space. And so then it became around getting us into a building that honored the culture, the background, the heritage of our families, while also bringing them into the 21st century with the spaces themselves.
Yeah, and Kaye, that was really, I mean, that was the essence of our whole case, our whole argument here is that creating this facility is going to create an equitable playing field, but it was all lined up. Like, this is the issue here we're facing. This is how we're trying to solve it. We're not going to solve it unless we have a new facility. It's not going to be an equitable playing field. These kids are going to be left behind.
Absolutely. Well, and because such a huge chunk of my budget, not a huge chunk, but a substantial chunk of my budget every year had to be put aside to anticipating what could go wrong. And then my time was also monopolized, like after the flood, the amount of time I had to spend fighting with insurance companies about our loss of business and the damage. So like between that, you just end up like eating away at your most valuable resources that could be funneled into equalizing that playing field. So all of it wrapped up to like create this argument that like the most efficient way to solve this problem is to get us a new building.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, floods and insurance.
Yes.
Bring me back to on the board of Axel Academy. All that time, instead of spending it on what we're there.
Critical work.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. And really the last one, provide the evidence. Tell that success story. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, some of that data and stats, and it's also a great place to bring in the data stats. I always like to stay away from like, we're the only, or we're the biggest, and stick to that impact. So Kaye, at RFMA, there was a great success story. There's no question. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so as referenced earlier, the ability for us to help empower our kids to persist through high school when a lot of their peers throughout the metro area were not, was a tremendous success and continues to be a tremendous success. I know one of the highlights of my years in leadership was getting an annual call or reference back from a new teacher or leader sharing how much they valued our students showing up with a voice. And that to me was everything, because it meant they left feeling confident in who they were and that their skills of advocacy were strong. And so they felt like they could move into the next phase of their education and next space and say, hey, this is something we need. Like, we need to talk about restorative justice, or we need to talk about the curriculum and the books we're reading, or I need to have more of a voice, or why don't we have a Latinx club, or, whatever it was their ability to leave their K-8 experience, move into high school, and start to say, hey, I have a right to be in this space and show up as who I am. And for us, it was always that creating that equitable access and empowering our kids and families. And we started to see that. And being able to secure then the school to help create an even bigger platform for them to have that equitable access was tremendous.
Yeah, it was really, showing, what is possible. What can we accomplish here? And then that empowerment of those students and them thinking, then, okay, what's possible?
That's, yeah. And it kind of, it's a neat place to leave. And I think that's one of the things to take away is like, by using the data and the stories, you say, okay, you're basically saying, look at what we're already doing. Imagine what we could do when, right? Like it's that creation of the possibility, yeah, which is huge.
All right, and then the sixth part is the close, when you get to make the ask. And so, you've lined up your audience, your listeners, those looking at your campaign, going through the whole thing. This is the problem. This is, if we don't do anything, we're going to step in the light. We can solve it. Here's how we're solving it. Here's the evidence of us solving it. Join us, join this, be part of it. And that's really what you want to ask people to do. It's not like give now, we need, it's join us and become part of this. And that's, not everybody's going to want to join, and that's okay. You want, your message to resonate with those that really care about this, and they're going to be inspired, and they'll join and give. And it's really about, it's participating in a movement. I think in RFMA, that was a linear or easy ask, or easy to demonstrate. You want to talk about that a little bit, Kaye?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. One of our, actually, it was like really great. Two of our 5 values. One was united, and one was solucionista. And so for us, the join us was a call to action to like be a solucionista with us, help us solve this problem, right? United, we change everything. United, we level the playing field. So for us, it was a nice, like, our values provided, and our DCHOs, we had some DCHOs that aligned nicely too. It funneled through, but it was the idea that you are, and I love this word, so forgive me, I keep using it. You're empowering and engaging your audience to participate in the solution you see, right? Like it's like, be the change you want to see in the world. And that engages, and however they choose to show up, they may just choose to like forward your posts a million times because they can't give, but that's great because you didn't have that before, right? The idea is engaging them and not limiting them in how they can engage.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. All right, so that brings us, bringing it all together, and those 5 steps and then the ask can really help you build your story. And I think, as Kaye mentioned, as a leader, this is probably one of the most important things you can do as you look to build your micro campaign. It's also the most important thing as you look just to build fundraising for your school. It's absolutely critical to have these things in place. So you can get the download of our webinar right here, info Make Philanthropy Work, Charter Micro Campaign, and you can access this presentation. And also we'll have a toolkit, a little building checklist for building your micro campaign, which will help get you started, get you on your way to a successful micro campaign. And any questions, please contact us. There's our contact information. Happy to answer any questions, happy to go through this with you, talk about a micro campaign, building a micro campaign, and happy to help you with any other fundraising areas that you might have, or fundraising needs that you might have. So there's our contact, and that's a wrap. Thank you again, and good luck with your campaign.